My younger brother moved into my condo just for a few weeks after his lease ended, and 14 months later, he was still there, eating my groceries, running up my utilities, and telling anyone who would listen that I was lucky to have such good company. My mother called me selfish when I finally asked him to leave. I didn't argue. I just pulled out the co-ownership agreement he'd signed when I bought the place, the one that gave me the legal right to end a shared occupancy arrangement with 60 days written notice. The problem was, he thought he'd signed something very different. Make sure you stay till the end, because what he discovered in that agreement changed everything. And we'd love to know, where in Canada are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. I bought my condo in Burnaby 2 years ago. It took me 4 years of working double shifts at the hospital. I'm a registered nurse, living on rice and lentils, driving a 2009 Civic with a cracked dashboard, and saying no to every vacation, every concert, every spontaneous Friday night my friends invited me to. I did not have a trust fund, a wealthy grandmother, or a parent who helped with the down payment. I had a spreadsheet, a stubborn streak, and a mortgage broker named Pat who told me I qualified for exactly as much as I could afford and not a cent more. The condo is small. One bedroom, a decent kitchen, a balcony that gets afternoon sun. To me, it was everything. My brother, he's 26, 2 years younger than me, had been bouncing between apartments for most of his adult life, not because of bad luck, because he simply refused to do the boring, grinding work of stability. He quit jobs when they felt repetitive. He let leases lapse because signing renewals felt too final. He borrowed money from our parents and paid it back in installments of goodwill and excuses. He was charming, genuinely charming, the kind of person who could talk his way into a job in the morning and out of the same job by afternoon and somehow make both feel like the right call. When his lease ran out last October, he texted me on a Tuesday evening. "Hey, landlord's selling. Gotta be out by the 31st. Can I crash at yours for a bit while I sort things out?" A bit. I should have asked him to define that. I said yes. I said yes because he was my brother, because it was October and cold, because our mother called me right after he texted and said, "You have space, you know he needs time to get back on his feet," and because some part of me still believed he would actually get back on his feet. He arrived with 3 duffel bags, a gaming chair, and a very expensive electric skateboard. That should have told me something. The first few weeks were fine, or fine adjacent. He slept on the pull-out sofa, kept the living room mostly tidy, and made breakfast sometimes on weekends. Real breakfast, eggs and sourdough toast, the kind that almost made you forget the gaming chair that had colonized the corner of my living room like a small throne. By December, he'd found a part-time contract gig doing social media content for a local gym. 15 hours a week. He acted like he'd landed a senior vice presidency. By January, the contract hours had quietly shrunk, and he'd started talking about a creative pivot. He was going to do freelance video production. He'd done a course online. He had a vision. By March, the vision had evolved into a podcast. By May, the podcast idea had shifted into a personal brand he was building on Instagram. The follower count hovered somewhere around 400, mostly people he knew. None of this is what broke me. What broke me was a Saturday afternoon in late July, 14 months after he'd arrived with his duffel bags. I came home from a 12-hour shift overnight, which meant I'd been awake for over 20 hours, and I found him sitting cross-legged on my sofa with 2 friends I'd never met, all 3 of them playing video games and eating what turned out to be the pasta I'd made on Thursday and was planning to eat for lunch before my next shift. The fridge was open. There were beer bottles on my coffee table. One of the strangers had taken the throw blanket my grandmother knitted me and balled it up behind him like a cushion. I stood in the hallway in my scrubs with my bag on my shoulder, and I looked at the scene and I thought, I am so tired. Not just physically, tired in the way that goes all the way down. I said hello to his friends quietly. I asked if they could wrap up in the next little while because I needed to sleep. My brother laughed, not meanly, just carelessly, and said, "She's a nurse, always exhausted." Like my exhaustion was a personality quirk, a fun fact about me, something between affectionate and dismissive. I went to my room and I called my mother. He needs to move out, I said. I need my home back. The pause on the other end was very long. You know he's still figuring things out, she said. He's been figuring things out for 14 months, in my condo, in my living room, eating my food. He's your brother? I know who he is. You have more than enough space for the two of you. He's not hurting anyone. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. I'd been awake for 22 hours. My grandmother's knitted blanket was bunched up behind a stranger's back in my living room. Mom, I need you to hear me. I am asking him to leave. Another pause. Then her voice shifted into its other register, the one that was part wounded, part warning. He has nowhere to go, sweetheart. You have a good job, a beautiful place. You're so lucky. The least you can do is support your family. There it was, the least you can do. As if buying a home through 4 years of sacrifice was luck, as if nursing 12-hour overnight shifts was simply good fortune, as if my life was something that had happened to me rather than something I had built. I said goodnight and hung up. Here's the thing my mother and my brother didn't know. The thing that's important for the rest of this story. When my brother moved in, I had consulted a tenant lawyer, a woman my coworker recommended just to understand my rights. I explained the situation, family member, informal arrangement, no lease. She walked me through something called a license to occupy. Not a tenancy, but a written agreement governing how someone can use a space within your home. It was essentially a document that outlined the terms of a stay, including my right to end the arrangement with 60 days written notice and his acknowledgement that he had no tenancy rights under British Columbia's Residential Tenancy Act because he was sharing accommodation with the owner. I told my brother I needed him to sign it before he moved in. I framed it as a formality. My mortgage broker needs documentation of who's in the property, I said, which was a small oversimplification, but not entirely untrue. I slid the 2-page document across the kitchen counter. He skimmed it for approximately 30 seconds and signed at the bottom. He thought he was signing something that gave him the right to stay. He had no idea he was signing the document that gave me the clean legal mechanism to end it. The next morning, rested enough to function, I drafted the notice. 60 days effective immediately, the date at the top, my signature at the bottom. I made 2 copies. I wrote a brief, factual email to my mother explaining what I was doing and why, attaching a photo of the signed agreement and the notice. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just sent the facts. Then I handed my brother the envelope while he was making his morning coffee. "What's this?" he asked. "Your 60-day notice," I said. "I need the space back." He opened it, read it slowly this time, more slowly than he read anything I'd given him before. "You're kicking me out. I'm giving you 60 days, which is more than the legal minimum. I thought you were okay with things." I was trying to be. I'm not anymore. He looked up. His expression was confused first, genuinely confused, and then it moved into something harder. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's something we can talk about. I can help you look at short-term rentals, sublets. The 60 days gives you real time to." "You're serious?" He set down his coffee mug. "You're actually doing this?" "I am." He left the kitchen. 10 minutes later, I heard him on the phone in the living room. I couldn't make out words, just tone, the escalating rhythm of someone reporting an injustice. I knew exactly who he was calling. My mother called me 4 minutes later. "What did you do?" she said, and her voice had the particular quality it got when she'd been crying but was trying to sound controlled. "I gave him notice, legally, 60 days. He's your brother?" "I know. He has nowhere to go. He has 60 days to find somewhere." "Why would you do this to him? To family?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "He told me you just handed him a piece of paper. No conversation, no warning, just a paper." "I told you last night I was going to ask him to leave. You told me I should be more supportive." "I didn't think you meant like this. I didn't think you'd make it legal." "This is cold, sweetheart. This is so cold." "Cold." I'd heard that word used to describe me before, usually when I was declining to fund something or enforce some boundary or failed to dissolve into guilt fast enough. Mom, I said, I live here. This is my home. I have a right to ask someone to leave it. He needs more time. He's had 14 months. Silence. You always do this, she said finally, her voice going quiet in the way that meant we were moving past negotiation into verdict. You've always been like this. So rigid, so by the book. Your brother is warm and spontaneous, and you've always made things harder for him by having rules. Yes, I know. I had heard this comparison before many times in many forms. He was warm. I was rigid. He had heart. I had spreadsheets. He needed room to grow. I needed to make room. I have to get ready for work, Mom. I'll call you later. I didn't call her later. She called me 6 times. I let them go to voicemail. The messages were a progression I recognized from every other time I had failed to immediately get my brother what he wanted. First, sadness. I just don't understand why you couldn't talk to us first as a family. Second, guilt. Your father and I sacrificed so much to make sure you both had what you needed. Third, gentle pressure. He said he's found a room he can look at, but it's not in a great area and he's really stressed. Fourth, escalation. I've been crying all afternoon. I don't know why you would do this to us. Fifth, withdrawal. Silence, just the sound of her breathing, then a hang-up. Sixth, the next morning, a reset attempt, breezy and careful. Hi, sweetheart, just checking in. Can we talk? My brother tried a different approach. He texted rather than called, and his texts had the tone of a person who had been caught doing something wrong and was now calculating the best angle of re-entry. I know you're frustrated. I've been looking at places. Can we just talk? Then, a few hours later, I found a sublet in New Westminster for December. I just need a bit more time before that, maybe another month or two past the 60 days. A month or two past the 60 days, the 60-day notice he'd already received. I have a job lead too. Things are actually picking up. I had heard about things picking up many times before. Things were always just about to pick up. I did not respond to the texts, not because I was being cruel, or at least not only because I was too tired to manage his feelings on top of my own. I didn't respond because I had learned slowly and painfully over the past 14 months that responding invited negotiation, and I was done negotiating. The notice had been served. The lawyer had been clear. The 60 days would run. The real escalation came 10 days in, on a Tuesday, which also happened to be my day off, one of 2 per week. I had plans, modest plans, sleep past 7, go for a run along the Burrard Inlet, pick up a few things at the farmer's market, call my friend who just had a baby. Small, quiet plans, the kind of day I hadn't had in a long time. I was still in my running gear, just back from the inlet, when my buzzer went. I looked at the intercom camera. It was my mother. Beside her, my brother. I buzzed them in. I didn't know what else to do. They came up and I opened the door before they knocked. My mother looked the way she looked when she'd decided that this visit was important enough to dress for a nice blouse. Her good coat, the earrings she wore to functions. My brother stood slightly behind her, hands in the pockets of his jacket, staring at the floor. "Can we come in?" my mother said. I stepped aside. We stood in my living room, the 3 of us. My mother sat on the sofa. My brother stayed near the door like someone who hadn't decided yet whether to commit to the room. I stayed standing. "I want to talk about this together," my mother said, as a family, calmly. "Okay," I said. "He's found a place in New Westminster. It's available December 1st. She did the math, about 10 days after your 60 days ends. Can't you just give him until December 1st? 10 extra days? He's your brother." 10 days? It almost seemed reasonable. That was the genius of it, honestly. Start with 60 days past and then, when I held firm, negotiate down to 10. Shrink the ask until it sounded absurd to refuse. "The notice stands," I said. "The date is the date." My mother's expression shifted. Why are you being like this? Like what? So inflexible, so official. He's not a tenant, he's family. I took a slow breath. He signed a document when he moved in, a license to occupy. He has no tenancy rights because he shares the property with the owner, with me. The 60-day notice is what I'm legally able to do, and it's what I'm doing. My mother stared at me. What document? What are you talking about? My brother's head came up slowly. I saw something move across his face, not quite recognition, more like the first edge of it. When he moved in, I said evenly, I had him sign a short agreement. It outlined the terms of the arrangement, including my right to end it. You tricked him, my mother said, and her voice was suddenly flat and cold. I gave him a document and explained it was a condition of moving in. He signed it. He didn't know what he was signing. You took advantage. I handed him 2 pages of plain language and told him to read it. He trusted you. And I trusted that he would actually look for a place to live within 14 months. I hadn't raised my voice. I was surprised by that. Something in me had gone very quiet, not numb exactly, but clear. Mom, I work 12-hour overnight shifts. I came home 2 weeks ago and there were strangers on my sofa using my things. I need my home back. Then you should have said something sooner. I said something last year and the year before. Every time I said something, you told me to be more patient, to be more supportive, that he just needed time. I gave him time, 14 months of it. Now I'm giving him 60 days, and that's what's going to happen. My brother spoke for the first time since they'd arrived. You could have just talked to me, he said, and his voice was quieter than I expected. Not angry, something more confused. You didn't have to make it legal. I made it legal, I said, turning to look at him, because every time I tried to have a conversation about it, it turned into a negotiation. It turned into just a few more weeks. It's almost sorted I have a lead on something. I made it legal because I needed something that couldn't be talked around. He was quiet. I'm not trying to hurt you, I said, and I meant it. I genuinely want you to have a good place to live. I want you to be okay. But I need my home back, and I needed something with a fixed end date that I didn't have to keep defending. My mother made one more attempt. Her voice had gone soft, not the calculating soft of earlier, but something more genuinely exhausted. You know, when I was young, family helped each other. You didn't need documents. You didn't need lawyers. You just took care of each other. I did take care of him, I said. For 14 months I took care of him. This is the end of that particular form of care. She didn't have an answer to that. They left about 20 minutes later. My mother hugged me at the door in that careful way that meant she wasn't over it but was choosing not to continue. My brother said goodbye without meeting my eyes. I closed the door and stood in my kitchen and ate a bowl of cereal because it was the simplest thing in the world. And for a long moment I just stood there eating it and looking out the window at the afternoon light on the buildings across the street. The next few weeks were quiet. Not comfortable, exactly. My brother was still in the apartment, sleeping on the pull-out sofa, and there was a new, careful silence between us that was different from the comfortable, easy noise of before. He was looking, genuinely this time. I could tell by the way he was on his laptop with actual tabs open, actual applications being filled out, actual phone calls taken in a low voice in the living room. Once he came into the kitchen when I was making dinner and said, "The New West place confirmed. December 1st move-in, like I said." "Good," I said. "I'm glad." He nodded, and we stood there for a moment in an awkward, not quite resolved space. "I didn't read it properly," he said eventually. "Of the document?" "I know. I thought it was just, I don't know, paperwork." It was paperwork. Paperwork that said what the arrangement actually was. He leaned against the counter. He looked, suddenly, genuinely his age, which is 26 and not 16, regardless of what the last few years might suggest. Was it always going to end like this? I thought about that honestly. I hoped it wouldn't. I said, I hoped you'd find something by spring. I hoped I wouldn't need the notice. He looked out the window for a moment. Mom says you set me up. What do you think? He was quiet for long enough that I knew he was actually considering it. I think, he said slowly, that I should have read the paper. That was the most honest thing he'd said in 14 months, possibly longer. He moved out on a Saturday in late November, a few days before the deadline. He rented a van, and I helped him carry boxes to the elevator, which was either a strange grace note or simply the thing you do when someone you love is moving out. We didn't have a movie-style reconciliation. We didn't hug it out or cry or make large declarations. We carried boxes. I made coffee after, and we drank it standing in the now almost empty living room, and it was uncomfortable and a little sad, and also, underneath all of that, something I hadn't felt inside my own home in over a year. Quiet. My mother called that evening. She was more subdued than she'd been in weeks. Her earlier anger burned down to something more like resignation. He got there okay, she said. The place is small, but it seems fine. Good, I said. A pause. I still think you could have handled it differently. I know you do. He's your brother? He'll always be my brother, I said. That doesn't mean he gets to live here forever. She didn't say anything to that. Mom, I love you, I love him, and I needed my home back. Those things are all true at the same time. She sighed, a long, releasing kind of sigh. I suppose they are. That wasn't agreement exactly, but it was the closest to it I was going to get, and I found I didn't need it to be more. 3 months later, my brother sent me a text on a Sunday morning. Not about money, not asking for anything, just a photo, his new kitchen, tidy morning light coming through a window, a coffee mug on the counter. Finally feel like a real person, he wrote. Weird. I looked at that photo for a long time. The kitchen was small and the window faced a wall, but the light was good and the counter was clean, and I knew exactly what he meant. Not weird, I wrote back. Just what it feels like when things are actually yours. My grandmother used to say that real love sometimes looks like holding a line. I didn't fully understand that when she said it. I think I understand it now. The thing about my grandmother saying that real love sometimes looks like holding a line is that I didn't believe it until I'd lived through the proof of it. I think about the version of me who said yes that October, who heard just a few weeks and chose not to ask what that meant exactly, who watched the gaming chair arrive and told herself it was fine. Part of that was kindness, genuinely, but part of it was something less flattering. A habit of smoothing things over before they became uncomfortable, of absorbing other people's chaos quietly so nobody had to have a hard conversation. I'd been doing that my whole life, and I'd gotten so good at it that I'd stopped noticing the cost. What my brother did wasn't malicious, not really. He was someone who had never been asked to sit with discomfort long enough to figure out how to solve it himself. Every time things got hard, there was a softer landing nearby. Our mother's reassurance, my silence, someone else's patience, absorbing what should have been his own problem to carry. That's not a character flaw you're born with. It's one that gets built, slowly, by the people around you who love you enough to help, but not quite enough to let you stumble. I think what I did, finally, was the more honest form of caring. Not easier, honest. Serving that notice required something I'd had to grow deliberately. The kind of clarity that comes from understanding your own situation well enough to act on it, even when the people you love are telling you you're wrong. I'd done my homework. I talked to a lawyer before he even moved in. I'd read the document I asked him to sign. That wasn't coldness. That was me finally treating my own life with the same seriousness I'd spent years applying to everyone else's. And the staying power it took, the 6 voicemails, the unannounced visit, my mother in my living room in her good coat, that required something I hadn't fully known I had until I needed it. A quiet, stubborn willingness to hold the line, not because I was angry, but because I knew it was right. Because I understood that 14 more months of the same arrangement wouldn't have helped him. It would have just delayed the moment when he finally had to face his own life. What moved me most, in the end, was the photo he sent 3 months later. The small kitchen, the clean counter, the morning light. Finally feel like a real person. He didn't need my rescue, he needed my boundary. Those are very different things, and I spent a long time confusing them. I don't think there's a formula for knowing when to hold and when to fold with the people you love. But I think it starts with being honest about what's actually happening, even when honesty is inconvenient. It starts with doing the quiet, unglamorous work of understanding your rights and your responsibilities before you need them. And it requires the courage to follow through on what you know is true, even when someone you love is crying in your living room and calling you cold. My home is mine again. So, in a way I didn't expect, is my brother.